So I'd like to start with a quote from Barbara Kingsolver, and this is from one of her books called Animal Dreams. I invite you just to close your eyes as I read this. The very least you can do in your life is to figure out what you hope for, and the most you can do is live inside that hope. Not admire it from a distance, but live right in it, under its roof. What I want is so simple, I almost can't say it. Elementary kindness. Enough to eat, enough to go around. The possibility that kids might one day grow up to be neither the destroyers nor the destroyed. That's about it. And right now I'm living in that hope, running down its hallway and touching the walls on both sides. So I wanted to start with this quote about hope. I started my last Kula meeting with this quote about hope. It's just so there for me at the moment with the sort of polycrises of the world. And I do find hope not an easy word, I think as an individual and also a Buddhist, but I know that I need hope and that somehow this is tied up with my own faith in the Dharma and my own Shraddha. So, I know that I'm not alone when I experience overwhelm with the existential crises of the climate and ecological emergency. And sometimes all the small acts that I do to reduce my own personal footprint can just seem so tiny and insignificant when I'm aware of the urgency of the systems level change that's needed. So for me, divestment represents one of the most hopeful approaches to disrupting those systems that continue to exploit planet and people, that those things are deeply interconnected. So I've got an ambitious plan. In my notes I said I've got an ambitious plan for the next 50 minutes, but it's a bit less than that. We're going to have 3 sections. So for the first section, I'm going to introduce you to the principles of divestment through a video. And I'm going to share with you why this is an ethical practice for me, underpinned by the Dharma. And I'll also share with you, as Angela was saying, a video recording from Joe Mission, and I'll give you a little bit of introduction into who Joe is, a really fantastic individual and a Buddhist in another tradition. So it'll be great to hear his own personal relationship also with divestment as ethical Dharma practice. So let's crack on and tell you about the second section. So then I'll introduce you to some of the successes already. And for me, that's what's so hopeful, that we're not starting somewhere from scratch, that we are standing on the shoulders of this a global movement that's been really successful in a very short space of time. And has its roots right back actually into anti-apartheid boycotting movement. I'm also going to share with you, so it's a very practical session, I want to share with you some tips for getting started with ethical reinvestment from a personal and institutional footprint perspective, as well as offering ways that you can get involved at a more systems level perspective too, if you wish. So we've got those 3 levels. And the 3 levels of divestment and the 3 sections of this session. For the final section, we'll hopefully have time to get into groups together. And I would really like to close with a mantra. And for Alison, who is here, and I've so appreciated Alison's support with all the sessions over this conference weekend, you'll remember something you posted to me right at the start of the pandemic, and that I then recorded for you. We'll hear that together. So let's crack on. And I think what's going to happen now is Aparajita is going to share this first video about the principles of divestment. Are you good for that, Aparajita?
There's this campaign going on mainly in the US at the moment, and it's a new way into the whole climate debate that is a bit different from, change your light bulbs.
Divestment is a very simple idea. You just take your money away from companies that are involved in extracting fossil fuels.
You want your money to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Divestment is the biggest signal which any individual or a company can give to the fossil fuel industry.
If you want to do something about climate change, you want those fossil fuel companies to stop burning the reserves they've got, and you want them to behave differently. You do that by refusing to buy their shares.
Divestment says we do not accept your premise, we do not like what you're doing.
And in practical terms, it's about moving your money away from the problem and towards the solution.
Don't know about you, but I don't really have any shares.
But
we all have stakes in pension funds, in various forms of investment through our lives, and those investments will almost certainly include shares in fossil fuel companies.
A generation ago, when the biggest moral issue in the world was apartheid in South Africa, Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu suggested this tactic, that it was time for the great institutions of the West to cut their economic ties with companies that propped up the apartheid regime. If there's ever going to be any kind of international agreement, it'll only be because our political and business leaders are feeling unrelenting pressure from all over the world.
So unless there's political pressure to change, nothing will change.
Divestment is very useful for shaming companies, it's very useful for bringing the issue out into the open more.
It provides a really powerful moral framework.
This is not a normal movement. There are no great leaders. There's no Dr. King of the climate movement. The fossil fuel industry is sprawling. It's protean. And so the resistance to it needs to be the same way.
But that's the exciting part. The change isn't a technological change, it's not scientific change, it is now social change.
We should be tackling the fossil fuel companies directly. Leave it
in the ground.
On the ground.
So I think this video does a really good job of highlighting the key principles of divestment. I'm not so keen on, well, I don't like the language of shaming that they use, but yeah, I think there's an approach to that as Buddhists that we can take, and there's some excellent shoulders to stand on with that as well, which we'll look at as we move on. Just a wee technical thing, Aparajita, if you manage for the next video to expand so that it's whole screen, that would be great, thank you. Okay. So, I think what this video clearly shows for me is that a key part of our work in addressing climate change guided by the Dharma is to understand systems. It's that systems thinking, and that's, well, I say understand systems, they're incredibly complex, but at least it's about getting curious. So understanding that there are systems, that there are these complexities, and how do they work? How are we complicit in them? And how can we change them to work for the good? So in this instance, we're talking about financial and economic systems, incredibly complex, but at the end of the day, it's like follow your money. Where does your money go? And for me, this speaks so strongly of the key teaching of Pratitya Samutpada, or conditionality. This is the dharmic underpinning for divestment. So what I wanted to share with you was something around, it's Sangharakshita discussing Pratitya Samutpada in his book, What is the Dharma? And he says, when you really think about the principle of Pratitya Samutpada, in whatever form it is, when you meditate on it, when you really follow through its implications, you begin to understand the extraordinary impact it has had on the world. Whatever comes into existence on whatever level does so in dependence on conditions, and in the absence of those conditions ceases to exist. This is all it says, and if anything is Buddhism, this is Buddhism. So I find this really very inspiring, and it's not new to us, is it? But every time I read this, I think, wow, these systems, these systems that we talk about that are perpetuating the exploitation of people and planet, they're just dependent on conditions, and if those conditions cease, then that exploitation can be transformed. So in terms of other dharmic underpinnings, I think this relates really nicely to verse 183 of the Dhammapada, which was wonderful to hear Amalakhetu saying that in his keynote back at Friday night. Angela, does that not feel like an age ago? Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the heart. So we think about divest and reinvest. And when we're talking about reinvestment, it's not like we just want to move our money out of those that invest in the fossil fuel industries and just to some other profit-making bank or insurance company or whatever. We want to reinvest in something different. It's like that alternative radical, that we're looking for something ethical, aren't we? It's an ethical practice. So if we can reinvest, it's that second part of the verse 183. So we stop, we divest, we take our money out of the things that are doing evil and we put it into doing good. So we're reinvesting in ethical. And that's where maybe not profit organisations or different models of banking, of finance, where our money is reinvested into social good. It could be community organisations, environmental organisations. And the last part, purify the heart. So for me, I think when we do cease to do evil, learn to do good, purifying the heart will follow. And I do have to actually thank Shanti Garba for highlighting the first two, like that neat kind of formulation, divest, reinvest, cease to do evil, learn to do good. It's something so simple and so hopeful for me. So I think when we think about this alongside conditionality and our understanding of karma vipaka, I can really begin to sense how the systems of harm to people and planet are dependent on these conditions. And if these conditions cease to exist, then, as I was saying, that harm can be transformed to healing. So I'd like to share with you an extract from a very inspiring article that I read recently in Lion's Roar magazine. This has a fantastic title, which I just loved. It's called Why Bodhisattvas Need to Disrupt the Status Quo. What a brilliant title. And actually, that disrupting the status quo goes all the way back to Sangharakshita's very early teachings too, about Triratna, or F.W. Buo at the time. So this article was written by a Zen priest and climate scientist called Dr. Kriti. And this is the extract I wanted to share with you. We are so used to systems of oppression that we have forgotten how to live in a way that is not separate. The top-down hierarchical systems that are rooted in exploitation and oppression must make way for systems and institutions that are rooted in compassion and the sacred care of all beings. This requires more than words and good intentions. It must be backed by the actions that redistribute power and wealth to those who are marginalised. Without this, societal healing and a just transition will not be possible. So I find this very moving because as a woman of colour, Dr. Kriti's systems view, or Buddhist systems view of the climate situation, she just takes in all those conditions that perpetuate harm. And we know that the exploitation of planet and the exploitation of it has always been linked to the exploitation of people. And so we'll all, as we continue to exploit the planet, we will continue to further marginalise and drive inequality. And what I think she does really well is articulate how, as Buddhists, it's our felt lived experience of non-separateness or insubstantiality, if we're looking at the Lakshanas, that's the foundation for our compassion and the path to awakening to like this full truth of Pratitya Samutpada. And yeah, for me, this felt sense of non-separateness is just so vital when we're engaging with divestment. Like that video that I was showing you from The Guardian earlier talks about shaming. And I think we're not, with any activism in this way, I'm not seeking to demonise those financial institutions that prop up the fossil fuel industry, or even the fossil fuel industry itself is a product of conditions. And we could go all the way back to seeing, as Analayo was talking about, that manifestation of greed, hatred and delusion. It's the human condition. So what I hope to be part of is that the dissolving of that polarisation, and I know my own, certainly previous activist years before I found Buddhism, natural tendency towards shaming and othering, that's those bad people. No, those bad people are me and I am those bad people. So I need to see all the individuals who work in these industries and their shareholders and their customers as human beings who also want to be free from suffering. And I think any divestment work that I engage in needs to be about working with and alongside those individuals in order to change hearts and minds. So Aparajita is going to shortly share with us another video, just giving him a wee heads up to get ready for that. And this video is just this gorgeous example of the divestment movement in New York City and the influence that had, the particular approach they took in terms of changing hearts and minds. So the activists were working alongside the decision makers. It's like this true way of how our democracy and citizenship should actually work.
The campaign has done everything from gather petitions to direct actions to marches. We marched 5,000 people on the 5th anniversary of Hurricane Sandy over the Brooklyn Bridge. Really, we used every tool at our disposal to let our elected officials know.
Thank you to the advocates and activists who called me a few times in the last couple of years. That's how this works. Pushing government makes us better.
This is the beginning of massive action in all corners of our country. It is possible to have momentous wins in your community. Start organizing everywhere, everyone, in every place.
Yeah, just a little clip there. I just find that fantastic. There is the New York City mayor saying, without you guys, we wouldn't be doing this, and we want this in our policy now. And later on in the video, it talks about a teacher, somebody working, just so delighted that her pension from New York City will no longer go to fossil fuels, that she's working for the good, working with young people, teaching, but had also, her money was going into the fossil fuel industry before that. So very, very inspiring. Okay. So we were talking about teachers with that last little bit of information that I gave you, which we didn't actually see in the video. As Angela was saying at the introduction, so I've been working with schools and young people and teachers, teacher training mostly, on global citizenship issues for over 10 years. And in this last 18 months, as you can imagine, we were preparing for COP 2020. We were starting to prepare for that in 2018, way before the pandemic delayed COP until 2021. And a big part of the work that we do is drama-based, and we love to use arts-based approaches to engage teachers and learners and support that sort of, light way into the curriculum to look at some really challenging issues. So recently we have been we developed this drama work alongside teachers and young people, where the teachers and the pupils themselves become characters in a community. And surprise, surprise, this community, they're actually, it's quite a small town that they live in, but their nearest big city is hosting the World Forum on Climate Change, which is basically just, a fictional version of COP. So they know that's coming near to them. The main employers in this small town are the local bank called Evergreen Bank. The community that actually, the clip that I'm going to play you, the kids themselves they go through this process of who are we going to be and what's our community going to be called. So it's Green Harbour Town. And they learn through the process of the teacher and role and drama that the bank is that also funds the play park, the community centre, the local orchards, and they really put themselves forward as a very green and forward-thinking bank. And then there's some dramatic changes, and they discover through some leak that actually the bank is investing in fossil fuels. So how do they go through that process when so many of them are employed by the bank? They have this strong relationship. So they have to do that relationship building to change hearts and minds. And it's that simple way of starting to learn about nonviolent direct action. So they achieve success by the end of this. And what I'm going to do is play you a little clip of myself and my colleague recorded as a training thing for what teachers could do with their young people. What a shame. I don't know why that is. Maybe, okay, never mind. I'll see if I can sort it for later. It was basically a dramatic thing with news, the kind of vibrant news music like you would get at the news at 6. Breaking news, Green Harbour have divested from fossil fuels. And, it's a big celebration with the kids. So we take them through that process. Yes.
I could share it now if you'd like to do it now.
Oh, I don't think it matters. I think it's better to stick to time so we can have more conversation. But thanks anyway. Sorry about that. Okay, so to finish up this first section on divestment and the Dharma, and to give Aparajita a bit of a heads up, we're shortly going to watch the video of Joe. So Joe Mission, some of you will have heard of. He's the co-founder of XR Buddhists, and he's also a psychotherapist and a mindfulness teacher, and he practices in the insight meditation tradition. He was also co-founder of the Dharma Action Network for Climate Engagement in London, which has been working closely with the Eco-Dharma Network, which is a pan-Buddhist network, bringing together individuals who see environmentalism as core to their Dharma practice. And the reason that I asked him if he would be happy to contribute to this session is that he has been, for over 6 years, organising Buddhist protests at Barclays Bank down in London. And Barclays are, well, we know that in terms of the stats, they're kind of like, in inverted commas, the worst bank for fossil fuel investment in the UK. There are others in different countries. So yeah, Eco-Dharma Network will be active in Glasgow, and I'm so excited to meet Joe for the flesh, in the flesh, when he comes up for COP. I hope you enjoy this video.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Diana, for offering me this opportunity to give my views on divestment. And in the spirit of divestment, I'll try to divest myself of my tendency to talk endlessly, with lots of amusing segues into Buddhist jokes and so forth, of which there are, I think, about 3. I'd like to touch on 2 elements, personal divestment and campaigning on divestment, and how both are strongly linked with Buddhist practice and wisdom teachings. So the question I'm asking in some sense is, how does our faith tradition inform and guide our actions? How can we act effectively, both personally and as campaigners, whilst remaining in alignment with our faith? Divestment away from investments in fossil fuels is clearly related to non-harming, which is one of the elements of the Eightfold Path. But I think this has already been mentioned, so I'm going to take a slightly different tack. So just to start with, the roots of the word divest is actually a French word, which is devester, which I'm probably mangling actually with my O-level French. But what it means is to strip away. And this might bring to mind the Buddha's encouragement towards living simply, which is demonstrated, of course, by the monastic life. I'm hardly living a monastic life myself, but I know that simplifying my life in various ways has meant not only a happier life, but one that does less harm. Maybe one example of this is that I sold my car about 30 years ago, and have not owned one since. Actually, it's my wife's car, but let's call it our car. So I've sold our car, despite, and not had one since, despite having 2 children and living in quite a small town. So this has simplified my life. It's one less thing to look after, to worry about, and my choices of travel are simplified. And also, I'm grateful not to have to spend so much time confined in a metal and glass box. It's also, of course, reduced my carbon footprint. And I now enjoy a life which is simpler and slower. So this is called letting go within Buddhist circles, which we know as Buddhists is the recipe for a happier life, because clinging to things makes you miserable, since things have the distressing habit of changing all the time or just losing their appeal. I think this letting go or divesting can be one of the fruits of a meditation practice in which we come to see what is really important, what really matters. And this is my segue into activism, because what really matters to me now, more than ever after my years of practice, is this astonishing blue-green planet we have been gifted, and simply put, the pain it is in. Actually, the pain we are all in. And what could be more essential? What could be simpler than compassion? Isn't love in the end what we are left with in all its shining essence when everything inessential has been relinquished? And so to turn to divestment in activism, what I want to say mostly now is that how we engage in our activism is absolutely crucial. Non-harming and compassion must be the place we move from. It must be the heart center of our way of campaigning, or we are simply contributing to the problem we are trying to address. So I'd like to illustrate how we've gone about bringing our practice into the front lines by talking a little about XR Buddhists' campaign against Barclays Bank, which incidentally has the highest investment in fossil fuels in Europe. Firstly, to say that our actions have a strong meditative component at their core. So we sit in meditation outside and often inside the bank, wearing placards conveying a message to Barclays and the public. And in this way, our actions are decidedly peaceful, while I think communicating also determination and contemplation. So the message on our placards can be quite blunt. And I want to show you what we've been using recently, which is this. I don't know if you can see that, one I did earlier. Sometimes in combination with this, which as you see has a rather different vibe. Now, I'd maintain that the message on the first banner is unambiguous and maybe confrontative, but I don't think we're embellishing the truth. Barclays' investments are killing species and people and endangering those not yet born. So this is fierce compassion, or compassion in action, where we act with force, but in alignment with the truth of the way things are. But we're careful to include everyone in our circle of compassion. And so I'd like to read an excerpt from our letter to the manager, which exemplifies this. So this is about 3/4 of the way down the letter. It says, sitting in silent meditation. So this is the manager. Sitting in silent meditation, we bear witness and bring to the public's attention that Barclays' investments constitute a direct and imminent threat to their future. We send our kindness and care to the staff of Barclays Bank. Their lives will also be impoverished and disrupted by climate impacts. But we consider that as a company, Barclays' investments demonstrate a reckless disregard of the scientific evidence, the safety of its customers, the planet, its people, and other species with whom we share this world. So I hope it's clear from this that we are opposing a system in the form of Barclays Bank, which is bought into the prevailing delusion, our prevailing economic model, that profit and growth will bring benefit and happiness. And we're encouraging Barclays to see through this delusion to the way things actually are. It's quite possible to make a decent profit, as so many companies and banks are now showing. Triodos Bank is an example of a highly successful business which invests only in ethical organizations and projects that benefit people and planet. So we are, you might say, urging Barclays to divest not only from fossil fuels, but from the delusion that profit is a good in itself, however you achieve it, and to pay attention, as Extinction Rebellion Buddhists are doing, that how we do things makes all the difference in the world.
So wasn't that great? Yeah, I just particularly love Joe's take on divestment as a practice of letting go, of simplifying. And I just really wish I could take that advice on more and more. There's a couple of my wonderful Kula members here with me today. I really appreciate that support. And yeah, letting go and simplifying, it's quite a challenge. But we know this is the recipe for contentment as Buddhists. And I also admire with Joe how he and his fellow XR Buddhists have struck this really good balance, or it seems to me, between fierce compassion during their bank meditations and not othering or shaming, recognising the humanity of all who work within the bank or are customers of the bank, like the letter to the bank manager. It's very important. So many thanks to Joe for sending me that video, and I really look forward to meeting him in person during COP. I hope some of you here will be able to come along too. So of course, Buddhists, no matter what tradition, we're not alone in this non-violent approach. It has its roots in almost all of the world religions, past and present, and for many people of no faith either, it's a principle that for many of my friends who are not people of faith, I know that's close to their hearts as well. So this does lead us into the second part of the session, just a heads up for Aparajita, which is, I think is going to be our last little video. And we're going to look at the global divestment movement's successes so far, and that these often have been driven by faith movements, or certainly by activists, and how we can get involved. We'll look at that after.
Around the world, people are saying our money won't fund climate change and are divesting from the fossil fuel industry's climate-wrecking business plans. 1 year ago, we set out an ambitious goal to get $10 trillion divested from fossil fuels by 2020. Well, we've done it and more. And the momentum is getting stronger. What began with a handful of universities, faith groups, and foundations has become over 1,100 institutions playing a key role in shifting trillions of dollars away from fossil fuels and into climate solutions.
We Catholics are divesting from fossil fuels as part of a big movement that includes universities and pension funds and banks and many more institutions. We're divesting because it's the right thing to do. We're divesting because fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas are toxic to our planet and everyone who shares this common home.
By divesting from fossil fuels and reinvesting in renewable energy, we can build the scale of climate change solutions, particularly to serve poorer energy communities, while simultaneously eroding the social license the fossil fuel companies have to continue to operate. Join this movement to finance a just energy future.
So it's such a positive video, isn't it? And that video itself, that came out just last year, in 2020. So we're building on that, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What I'm going to do now is see if I can share my own screen from this point on. Yep. So how can we do this? What are these practical tips? So there's these 3 levels we're talking about. There's your own personal finance footprint. There's an institutional footprint as well with the institutions we're involved in. And then there's that big systems level that we're talking about that Joe talks so much about in terms of that meditation activism. And as you're picking up, I'm sure already, and many on this call already aware of this, but there's a number of different ways. And the most obvious is who do you have your current account with? But then we can be thinking about our mortgage, our loans, savings, our pension providers. And often less known is that all of our utilities providers, we can do that, divest and reinvest. Certainly in the UK, we are lucky to have many options for this. So not just talking about gas and electricity, there are ethical investors for internet provision, for your mobile phone contracts. It's endless. Basically, where your money goes, there is a social not-for-profit organisation has recognised an opportunity to use that investment for good. So when we say divest, it's just shorthand for divest and reinvest for the good. And for institutional divestment, it's basically the same. We're asking of our, I suppose for us in Triratna, of our centres, of our Triratna institutions, who do they bank with? Who provides the utilities? if there's any investments and savings, who are they using for that, which building societies? And then we've been hearing a lot about that systems level divestment as well. So it might be that you live in a particular municipality or local authority, or you're employed by the public sector. So find out what happens with that, with your money in those levels as well. The UK government, the Westminster government, invests in the fossil fuels too. So there really is, it's everywhere, which can be a bit overwhelming. But once we become aware, we can become part of that solution. So I wanted to raise awareness about the next big interfaith global action, which is on the 18th of October. There's actually 2 days of action, so it's the 17th and the 18th of October. And the 17th is just for your own, so it's like faith-based community. So that for us would be with our Triratna Sanghas meditating for the earth. Much like that beautiful meditation that I was so sad to miss and catch the end of with my Devi there. And then on the 18th is that public-facing meditating outside of a bank or another institution that invests in fossil fuels. And I think many of us are trying to do that in front of Barclays, especially here in the UK, where that is the biggest investor in the fossil fuels. So if this is something you're interested in, hold your horses, because we're about to look at other levels as well. So 18th of October, that's coming up. And then recently what we discovered was that the 25th of October, there's going to be a large global divestment announcement across other faith-based organisations as well. So this in the UK is being organised by Operation Noah, and that's a campaign across different denominations of churches to divest. You can see how successful obviously that was with the Catholic campaign from that video. But the network of Buddhist organisations and Eco-Dharma network that Joe's part of, Angela and I have been meeting with them too. So they're really keen on Triratna joining this. And so far, we haven't got anybody from Triratna yet. I've said I might be able to, but a bit pressed because I'm going on solitary in October. So again, there's many opportunities for us to get involved. Okay, so let me just do a wee time check and have a wee 1:15. It's quite tight. I'd quite like to finish on a mantra. I think my preference instead of breakout rooms would actually be to use the chat box function. So there's no obligation to do this, obviously, but if you would like to let us know, the Triratna Earth Sangha sort of organising team, which is really small at the moment, we want this ownership to move wider. And I love that Chandra Das has been saying over the course of the weekend, we are the Triratna Earth Sangha, you know, that people who come to this and are showing an interest, that is us. But what I would love to do is set up a Triratna Earth Sangha divestment subgroup to take this work further and do that in partnership with XRB, with Green Faith International, with interfaith groups. So there's a few ways that we can do this across the 3 levels. So level 1, I would quite like, this is just an example, but in one work of the divestment subgroup could be a resource so that wherever you are in the world, if you're interested, you can jump on that resource, probably on the Triratna Earth Sangha Network website, that would tell you a list of, right, I want to change my insurance provider, who will I go to? And it would be them. I would like to change, to have ethical internet provider, who would that be? But that's very country specific. So as much as myself and other people here could definitely have a go with the UK, I have no idea how for companies that would do the same thing in different countries. So that for me is a very clear task. And then the second level is Triratna institutional divestment. So I'm wondering if there's anybody interested in supporting that. And that could be part of, if you're setting up your own Triratna Earth Sangha group at your own centre, could be part of that. Or if you're on your own and there isn't a Triratna Earth Sangha group in your Sangha, but you'd like to join in with us, that kind of idea of doing a bit of an audit there. And then obviously the third level is that stepping out into the world, that 4th sight that Angela and I have experienced many times, meditating in public with these messages for the climate is a very powerful experience. So if you're interested in joining with others of faith in in non-violent direct action. For example, there's that action on the 18th of October, so that is very soon. So please pop in the chat box. You could just pop the numbers 1, 2, or 3, and then you could also send me your email address. You could just do that by direct message to me just now, and I would quite like to set up a wee doodle poll and get a meeting together to take this forward. It'd be lovely to have some more people on board with that. I would really would very much appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to hold up to the screen for, is Alison, I don't know if you're still there, Alison, I can just see your garden. But back in early pandemic days, much in March or April, hello love. So here, Alison sent me this beautiful, Pali writing of the Praticca Samutpada mantra. And she probably remembered that Devan was here earlier as well. I'm not sure if he's still here, but on this very first retreat of This Being That Becomes, when the book came out, I was on that retreat at Danakosha with Devan and learned the mantra at that point. So I would really love to share that with you and just invite you to close your eyes and bring your hands together in prayer for the world, and join with me in this. Imasmin sati idang hoti, imasupada idang upajati, imasmima sati idang nahoti, imasanaruda idang nirujati. Imasmin sati idang hoti, imas upada idang upajati, imasmim asati idang nahoti, imasanaruda idang narujati. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thank you.